I'm Sarah Nagle. I've spent my career leading research and product development within some of the world's largest brands.
And I'm Chad Reynolds. I'm a serial entrepreneur and founder and CEO of Vurvey.
And this is AI Powered by People.
Each episode will dive into the latest AI developments and talk to an industry leader to help you better understand and utilize AI.
We'll take you inside some of the world's most famous companies and share examples of how AI is improving innovation, consumer engagement, media, and marketing.
No matter what industry you work in, we'll help you navigate one of the biggest disruptions to organizations and people today.
Hey, Chad, how are you doing?
Hey, Sarah. I'm doing good.
Yeah?
We have some news to share.
All right. Tell me about it.
We just heard from Google that we're going to be one of the featured generative AI startups at Google Next in Las Vegas in a couple weeks to officially launch a whole new feature called V-Team.
Before you get into it, what's Google Next?
Yeah, so Google Next is the annual conference for Google Cloud, kind of a celebration and launch of all different generative AI features, cloud, all kinds of things. So usually is attended by CTOs, developers, startups, obviously Gen AI and AI in general has been the feature over the last couple of years. So we were there last year to present with Google on stage a lot of the multimodal capabilities that Vurvey has. So kind of taking video and turning it into insights and new ideas was pretty groundbreaking. So we demoed that and talked through those use cases last year. And so this year we're getting invited back to share kind of the next generation of what we're building, and excited to be there. So for any listeners who might be there, it's April 9th through the 11th, Mandalay Bay, which I feel like is my second home. I think we've been there
in Vegas.
four times this year. We'll be on site at Google Next in the Startup Showcase area as well. Couple talks. And I think one of the nights will be at the Sphere for like a special event. So yeah, hit us up. If you're going to be there, we'd love to meet up in person.
Awesome. Well, that's super exciting. So we're going to hear about that more next week. But coming up today, we're going to be sharing a thought-provoking interview we had with Adam Dodge, and he's a lawyer that was recently featured in a Time article about the Taylor Swift deepfakes that happened early in the year. It was a big controversy. So he's the founder of an organization called EndTAB that tackles technology abuse. And we're going to be discussing the deepfakes. We're going to be talking also about what parents can do to protect themselves and their kids. So please note that this episode contains sexual content and is not appropriate for all listeners or viewers. So if you're in the car with your kids, this might not be the best episode for them to listen to.
This is a really good one. So I definitely want to stick around. Stick around for this.
Before we get to our interview with Adam, let's take a look at what's in the headlines. So first up, Amazon doubles down on Anthropic. It seems like there's a lot of companies going at
They're going all in.
Yep, everybody's going all in.
Going all in.
So it's planned $4 billion investment. They invested further $2.75 billion in a growing AI power Anthropic on Wednesday. And they're one of the very few that compete with Gemini and OpenAI. So it seems like everybody's coming at OpenAI right now.
They are.
Anthropic.
Yeah, and Amazon put the money in right under the wire, so they had to get in their investment under by the end of Q1. So yeah, I mean there is a lot of excitement around Claude 3. I know we were a user of Claude 3 inside of our GCP. GCP is our like Google Cloud infrastructure. You think of it as where we deploy all of our tech. Yeah. Okay. So, but I guess the early testing of Claude 3 is that it's performing really well compared to ChatGPT 4 and some of the other open source models. So, but it just kind of furthers the major investment that companies are making into LLMs and also into kind of the chatbot experience around those. We covered this I think on last episode where we talked about Inflection AI kind of getting acqui-hired in a little bit way through Microsoft. Lots of movement in this space.
Yeah, including Elon Musk's AI startup XAI is looking to lock down billions in funding, also to take on OpenAI. And then also Databricks launches Databricks, I guess, DBRX. It's a new standard for efficient open source modeling.
Yeah, everybody hates vowels, so it's just all just to abbreviate it. Yeah.
Databricks democratizes the training and tuning of custom high-performing LLMs for every enterprise. So no longer need to rely on small handful of closed models.
This is going to be really interesting. Just kind of the private models versus the public and open models. Be interesting to see how adoption happens. I know within our own product, we're multimodal, so we're using kind of a group of different models for different use cases and things like that. I think we're going to continue to see even more and more models start to pop up as we go on. And then last up, voice cloning startup 11 Labs lands $80 million in investment and achieves unicorn status. Which, Sarah, you know what unicorn status is?
I love unicorns.
Do you? Yeah, this is different. This is kind of like the $1 billion club. But 11 Labs, if you're not familiar with them, but they're a startup developing AI-powered tools to create synthetic voices. Sarah, you know, I've experimented a little bit with this for maybe an experimental episode, or
yeah, I mean, we've been thinking about it. Like, what would it sound like for the podcast if we take all of the podcasts we've done so far, put them into a tool like this to be able to output what we would say about the news, but what our AI synthetic voices would say about the news. So we've been thinking about it. More to come there, but it could be pretty cool. Okay, now let's get to our interview with Adam Dodge. So Adam's a lawyer and founder of the organization called EndTAB, where they aim to keep people safe in the digital age. And Adam was recently featured in a Time article about Taylor Swift deepfakes. We're really excited about this interview. Really great stuff that's outside of what we normally talk about. Normally you're talking to, companies or brands creating things, but this is a different type of an interview where we're talking about a little bit about technology abuse and how to protect yourself and how parents can protect their children as well. Are you ready?
I am. Let's go.
All right, Adam, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so glad to have you.
Excited to be here.
So Adam, we spoke about, it was probably over a month ago, and we connected because we saw that you were quoted in an article in Time about the Taylor Swift deepfakes. And the article mentioned, I think Chad, who's like, hey, we gotta talk to this guy.
Talk to Adam.
Right on.
And you were quoted, and also we were doing a little bit of research about EndTAB, the company that you founded, but we'd love to hear a bit about EndTAB and kind of a little bit about you and why you founded this company.
Sure. I founded EndTAB because I was working in the victim services, domestic violence prevention and response space, gender-based violence space at a nonprofit, and had been there for a long time. And one of the challenges that just would not go away was this issue around technology being misused as a weapon to engage in really familiar forms of abuse. And one thing we learned is technology doesn't create new abuse, it just amplifies existing forms of abuse. And technology facilitated abuse was becoming ubiquitous in our cases. And simultaneously, we all knew we didn't know how to deal with it. And you don't get into a field like gender-based violence prevention for the money and the fame. And so you do it to help people. And what was becoming really apparent is technology was really good at making our job really hard. And when I sought out essentially training for non-tech experts to address and prevent the ways in which people are harmed online, that training just didn't exist. And that to me represented a critical need and an unmet demand in our field. And so I started playing around with how I could have agency and help folks who were being stalked or abused through their devices or through their accounts or through their apps. And what I found is I absolutely could, because in the overwhelming majority of cases, people are not tech experts. The people that are harming victims are not tech experts. And if that's true, then we don't need to be tech experts to act when someone's being harmed online or via their devices. And once word got out that I was doing this, other people started asking me to train them. And then I decided to leave a job that I loved at my nonprofit and start EndTAB to help other people feel empowered when a victim reported that they were being harmed through their technology.
Great. Thank you. And so we originally found you through the article that mentioned deepfakes, and they're becoming very sophisticated right now. But for our listeners, could you explain from your perspective, what is a deepfake and why is it a concern right now with, in the technology abuse space?
Sure. So deepfakes are part of synthetic image-based abuse. They're part of this new category where people can essentially use AI to generate intimate images, intimate videos of a victim from scratch. And the way deepfakes do this is through face swapping. So they take a victim's face from a photo, upload it to a deepfake video app, and it swaps the victim's face from the photo onto somebody else's face in a video, usually a pornographic one. And through the magic of AI, it renders a new video where it looks like the victim is now engaging in sex acts. It's their face, it's not their body, but it's as if the person in the video is wearing a mask of the victim, a very convincing one.
What tools are people using to be able to create these new images?
Sure. So I don't tend to mention them by name when I'm interviewed, just because I don't want to drive attention to them, but I can tell you that it's essentially point and click violence against women and girls. These apps are not trained to work on the bodies of men. And it used to be back in the day, 2017, 2018, if you wanted to create a deep fake, it required expertise, it required time, and it required computing power. Now you can get one of these apps and upload a photo of a victim and literally use your finger to select the victim's face and swap it and then drag it over to a video that you want to insert them into, and then just release your finger and the app does the rest. So we've essentially removed all the constraints and barriers to creating deepfakes with these new apps, and honestly could not be making it easier.
First off, thanks for all the work that you're doing. As a father of 3 young girls, it's incredibly important, the effort that you're putting behind this, the training around it, and also just spotting out the absence of policy at a federal level. So I'm wondering if you could, from what the research I've done, you have a few states that have criminal laws against specifically deepfakes, but with no current federal laws in place. And I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about some of the primary legal challenges of combating these, and especially when there aren't current laws in place to address those issues.
Yeah, I think that's where most people's minds go, is how can the institutions that keep us safe, our legal institutions, our law enforcement institutions, our legislative institutions, how can they keep us safe from deepfakes and synthetic AI imagery? And the challenge is, you're correct that some states have passed legislation around deepfakes targeting politicians, deepfake targeting women being inserted into pornographic videos. And there is some bipartisan momentum around a federal law. The problem is, when it comes to addressing deepfake abuse, there are really 3 legs to the stool. One is good laws, right? So we do need good laws, criminal and civil. People should be able to sue for damages to them to that they've suffered, either emotional distress or reputational harm or something like that, which is important to have, because going through the criminal legal system can be somewhat disempowering for victims of any crime, because you're really you don't have any say in whether somebody gets charged with a crime, how quickly, what they get charged with, how quickly it proceeds. Whereas with civil litigation, you have some control over that process. But we could have the best laws in the world, and they're useless if we can't enforce them. And that is, and I'm trying not to sound jaded because I talk about this issue a lot, but it's my issue with laws is great. Yes, let's get them on the books, but they can have the unintended consequence of setting up false expectations of hope for victims, because they pass a law. You go into law enforcement, you say, hey, some anonymous person has created and shared non-consensual deepfake pornography of me. I don't know if they're in the United States. I don't know if they're in another jurisdiction. Help me. Right? Our experience is that law enforcement is understaffed, under-resourced, and under-trained to properly address cybercrime in general, much less tech-facilitated violence against women. And so we don't really have the tool to implement and enforce these laws right now. And then the third, so we have the laws, we have enforcement, and then we need cooperation, because if somebody in Poland is behind this and you've gone to your local sheriff's department in the county that you live, like the idea that they're going to do anything about it is just not going to happen. And then what they'll likely do is refer to the FBI's Internet IC3 Center, Internet Crime Complaint Center, where a lot of these cases just go to die. And it isn't until, if you see any kind of cyber stalking case in the news, I guarantee you it's not one that's been going on for a few days, right? It's usually a campaign of abuse. And that's when it has to get bad enough for law enforcement to get involved, because when it's just a teen girl being targeted by some anonymous person in another country, a couple times, it's not going to garner the attention that it needs. So I'm encouraged by laws, but we need to also simultaneously be working on enforcement and international cooperation, and set expectations for victims that, look, this is a tough process. And if the person's in, North Korea, there's no cooperation that's going to be had. So
right.
Then it's about harm reduction, right, as opposed to holding somebody accountable.
Yeah, is that the focus, I guess, of if it originates out of that country, but what if it is getting shared through within a platform, like a social platform? Should the people who are sharing the information also, I don't know what being at fault looks like, in that regard, but knowing that the originator of it might have been outside of the country, but just curious if you were part of the sharing of, is that also just as a part of the civil side and also the criminal side?
Yeah, so some laws say that if you share, even if you're not the creator, then you are at fault. The problem is, if you're on any social media platform, the platform's not going to take responsibility, because from their view, this is third-party content, third-party speech. And as a result, under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, they have no legal obligation to remove that content. You can't sue them. If somebody puts a deepfake pornographic video of your daughter on, I'm just saying, not your daughter, Chad, but just somebody's daughter on Instagram, and you report it to Instagram, and this violates Instagram's community guidelines and terms and conditions, and Instagram doesn't take it down, you can't sue Instagram for a failure to act. Sometimes when a minor is involved, maybe there's some extra things you can do, but overall, they're not liable. They're going to say, hey, go after the person who's posting it, right? We're not responsible for this content. And by the way, we're not going to tell you who it is because we value your user privacy. So it can be a real frustrating process. So yes, technically for some laws, if you're sharing this stuff, you could be held accountable, but the likelihood that law enforcement's going to come knocking on your door is pretty low, is very low. So a lot of people ask me, well, how do you deal with this problem? And the way I think about it is, one, from harm reduction, like, okay, if something gets posted, how do we make sure it's the least harmful to this person as possible? And then how do we prevent it from happening? And the way we prevent it from happening is actually not through technology, but through education and awareness. Because I think a lot of young people whose frontal lobes are still developing are getting marketed the stuff on social media and encountering it, and they don't think it's a big deal. They don't think it's sexual violence when it actually is. And so how do we get the word out so that the first contact about this technology is not from an algorithm, but is from a trusted adult or a trusted resource or a school or something like that?
Can you talk about some successful examples of that education that you've seen?
I don't know that a lot of folks are doing it. I train other people to do it. I do it myself in middle schools and high schools and colleges in the way, it's hard to measure, right? Because how do you, if you get 100 students in a room and you talk to them about this stuff, how do you measure whether, like, you can do a survey at the beginning and a survey at the end to see, but that's not the most reliable thing. And then how do you measure it afterwards? But I can say I think it's successful just based on the feedback and the participation that we see. And the way we sort of talk about it is through the lens of consent and boundaries and safety, things that we're already talking about in schools, giving and getting permission, bodily autonomy, right? A lot of people, when they think about bodily autonomy, we teach our kids bodily autonomy all the time. Like, hey, if you don't want to give grandpa a kiss when he comes over, you don't have to. And the reason we do that is so that when they get older, if they're in a romantic relationship, and someone wants to do something physically with them that they don't feel comfortable with, they have sort of the wiring to say, hey, no, whoa, like, stop means stop, no means no. I'm not comfortable with that. And just because you care about me doesn't mean I have to let you touch my body. But the bodily autonomy conversation usually stops at our physical bodies. And I think we need to expand it to our digital bodies, images of our bodies, because people, when they co-opted Taylor Swift's body or teenage bodies or whoever, people are outraged, even though the photos are synthetic and not quote unquote real. People are outraged. And I think they're outraged because these are our bodies and people are manipulating them and sexualizing them and fetishizing them and taking power and control away from us when it comes to our bodies and our bodily autonomy. And when you think about all the time we spend online, like, hell yeah, bodily autonomy should expand beyond the physical, because, that's where we're existing most of the time. And so that's how I talk about it. And I encourage parents, hey, ask your kid if you can take their picture and post it online. Like, we should be asking that. I'm not dunking on parents that don't do it, but I think parents should, because if parents are telling them that they don't have to give their aunt a hug or a kiss when she comes over, then we should be asking them if we can post photos of them online, because otherwise we're being inconsistent with how we think about bodily autonomy. And then kids, as they grow up, will be more mindful when asking for a nude image or sharing a nude image. And these ideas around consent and bodily autonomy will make sense to them online and offline.
I'm curious from your perspective, like, what approach works? Because I think from our conversation, scare tactics is not the way that you approach it. How do you think about it, and how do you talk to parents?
Yes, I don't. Well, it's impossible not to scare them when you talk about this stuff.
Correct.
So it's the mark I'm trying to hit in my presentations, and this is based on what I've heard over and over again, is informative yet horrifying is usually what happens. But essentially, information is power and information is empowering. And so parents don't know what they don't know because they didn't grow up that way. They don't have the lived experience to help guide their kids. And so what I do is I say, look, this is what's going on out there. And the challenges that you might have faced in late high school or young adulthood are happening to kids in the 5th grade, right? They're coming into contact with new people, adult images, developmentally inappropriate content much sooner, right? It's happening earlier and more often, and it's magnified. So we need to sort of pivot our learned experience and sort of apply it to what our kids are experiencing. And then I give them actionable things that they can do about it. So they're not powerless, they're not helpless, but there's no reason why we should be blindsided by these issues. These issues are happening right now. They may not be as common as sort of physical bullying on a school campus, but they are happening with greater frequency than we realize. So I'm making them aware of it, and while acknowledging parents are busy, and like, this is one more thing, but this is what parenting in the digital age looks like, is we have to be, we want to be the trusted resource for this stuff, and then create space for our kids to come to us if it happens to them, and help them understand that it's not harmless, it's harmful. And just because you don't see the impact your actions have on somebody else doesn't mean you haven't harmed them, and help them build a little empathy in the digital age, which is really hard to practice when someone's not in front of you. And give them tools. The way I talk to parents is, look, I'm not asking you to do anything new. I'm just asking you to take what you already do and apply it to the online experiences your kids are having or will be having. And that's the way I approach it. So it's not some new set of things that parents have to do, because frankly, we're busy as hell being parents, and it's really hot. It's like one more thing, and it's easy just to shut down and be like, ugh, I just can't deal. But it's like, well, what if we made it relatable and easy for you to talk about it? And that's kind of how we approach it.
Well, even just that practical, that you don't have to give your grandparents or your aunt and uncle a hug. I mean, that got introduced to me, when we had our first daughter. But before that, I had never heard about that. It was always just an expected thing of like, you have to like hug your family.
Yep.
But the more it was kind of like the shock of hearing it. And then I'm like, wow, that makes complete sense. But you never really thought about it until you have a kid of your own. And then you have a different set of rules and best practices that, you obviously you inherited those from your upbringing, but then like living today, we have this different living experience that we need to incorporate into what we're doing. I don't know if you had that same experience, Sarah, but
Yeah, I did. And, Adam, we had talked about this before too with my son. I have a son. I don't have daughters, but yeah, can I give you a hug, rather than, go give whoever a hug or a kiss. And it's a shift, but it's necessary.
Totally. Yeah. And then we can expand it, right? To like, okay, you don't have to give grandma a hug. And if she wants to take a picture of you and you don't want to, like, we as parents need to intervene and be like, hey, if she doesn't want to take a picture, like, that's okay.
Right.
Yeah. And like, I'm starting to see that more, where I've observed it in the wild. I've observed it in my own family dynamics, where if my kid doesn't want to take a picture, the relative that's asking will be like, it's okay, they don't have to. Right. And that's so validating, right? Because it takes the conversation from, you don't have to hug me if you don't want, and I don't have to take pictures of you and post them on the internet where anybody can look at them if you don't want, right? And we should wait until they can give consent to do that, like when they're old enough to give consent to do that.
Yeah. So Adam, one of the quotes you had in the article, the Time article, was that deepfakes are a symptom of a broader problem of online violence against women and girls that has historically not been prioritized by tech companies and society. It was very, very, very pointed. And, I know there are, we talked a little bit about the different types of companies. You've got kind of the tech companies that are generating or just making it really easy to create these images, the content. And you've got other platforms that are making it really easy to share and spread them. And I'm just curious, are you delineating between those two types of companies, and are there specific things that you would advise companies in those spaces, who may, let's say, like, hide behind some of the policies that are already in place, but just what would you advise them on? I know it's a hard question.
How much time do we have?
It's a hard question because
but it's a good question. Historically, these companies were startups, right? And they apply this move fast and break things, grow at all cost mentality. There's not a lot of investment in trust and safety on the front end. It's like, oh, we created this product and now people are harming, I guess, somebody with it. We better figure that out, how to deal with it. Very rarely have they invested in trust and safety in a meaningful way. They may do it somewhat, but what I tell them is for like early stage startups, if you're creating something that it's not hard to forecast how a product will be misused to harm somebody, right? And so thinking that through at the R&D phase or at the outset, you can build in a lot. You can build something that mitigates harm at the outset just by thinking about it. But people aren't thinking about it. They're like, let's burn through this. We got this VC money. We're going to burn through it, and we're going to grow. And the people that are investing in them are rarely like, hey, what are you doing about trust and safety? How are you thinking through this? They're just like, build this MFR and let's get going. And that mentality needs to change because we've seen it's a cautionary tale. Time and time again, people are weaponizing technology to cause harm, from Apple AirTags to whatever. And so for early stage folks, that's what I say. It's like, look, you need to sit around and think about this stuff because, it's morally and ethically obligatory in my opinion, but also, it's going to save you is time and money down the road when this stuff, and if you're successful, this is going to happen. And then for bigger companies, when they suffer, like a good example is Bumble, like they just laid off so many like policy people and trust and safety people. Like when the chips are down, it's usually trust and safety that gets shredded. And it tells us that is, because it's not necessarily an income generating or a user acquisition position that you can ditch trust and safety.
Like could it be? So if for not necessarily to name names, but like for companies that may want a premium subscription, which takes you out of that, out of seeing certain content, out of interacting with certain profiles that kind of known for that. I guess, is there space for that type of premium experience or elevated experience that takes you away from it and also helps to create some top line revenue for those teams? Because I know they historically have been a cost center for companies, and similar to research, right? It's like whenever budgets get cut, the immediate place you go to is research. But the fact of it is that they're usually the ones generating the insight around the best idea possible. So it just doesn't make sense, but it seems like it's similar happening to trust, compliance, security, all those types of things. So I'm just thinking of like, what are ways that you can justify that it's not where you would cut it?
Yeah. I mean, I think parents, women, I think people want to, I think it's a selling point to say, hey, we've reduced harassment on this platform by X%, like some examples of this. Bumble, who I really like, they're female founded, female forward company. They were the first people to come out with what they call private detector, which now Apple has adopted, which it's called sensitive content warning that they just added with their latest iOS update in the fall. So now if someone sends a nude, consensual or otherwise, it blurs it in transit. And then, so you don't have to get cyber flashed. You don't have to have, a DPIC sent to you and have to view it, whether it's airdrop or text or whatever. So we've seen examples of that. Bumble also in the background, because so many fake profiles are on there, they're using AI to basically detect profiles before you even interact with them. And so there are examples of this that I think can be, I'm not inside these companies, but can be a marketing tool. I mean, another example is Apple AirTags, as I mentioned. They're a popular tool in the Stalker's toolkit, but Apple has listened. They didn't listen before they launched in the way that we thought they should, but once it came out, they have made it safer. You get alerted within 4 hours if you have an unwanted AirTag with you. But then you look at Tile, which is owned by Life360 now, and they followed suit. They said, oh, in our app, you can scan for an unwanted tile tracker. But then they changed it. They added a feature called incognito mode saying, hey, well, if you're using this to keep your stuff safe, if it gets stolen, then, we don't want the thief to be able to use our app to scan to see if it's there. And so we'll create incognito mode to make trackers invisible to even our own scanner. And so, it's
So
it's like, well,
close,
they're
yet so
prioritizing
far away.
anti-theft as opposed to anti-stalking. And so those are some examples, but I think safety can be a selling point. I don't know if it should be a premium. I think it should just be standard, but I like your idea of, hey, maybe we at least beta test like a premium version where, we offer all these enhanced safety features that cost money, and see if people pay for it. I mean, I'd be curious of that.
Yeah, I'd just be surprised, or maybe not surprised of like what people would choose. Because you hate to see that that's the first business unit to get impacted. And as a parent, you're like, that's the most important thing that you could do right now.
There's some, I mean, the number one thing I hear from parents is just like, when should I give my kid a phone? When should I give them social media? How do I make sure they're using social media safely? Like all these things. And it's, I have no good answers. I mean, I have answers, but it's, the reason I don't have good answers is because social media platforms, don't do a great job with child safety, despite their claims that they do, and kids are repeatedly, the algorithm, knows all and will deliver content and connect people in ways that, are not healthy for kids.
Yeah. Do you feel like there should be, I guess, legal consequences that they should face?
Yes. Social media platforms, for sure. I think it's really, what's interesting is the way that they're sort of getting around Section 230 immunity is people are filing legal actions that are not getting thrown out under a product's liability claim, saying, hey, the product that you've created is faulty because you are putting kids in touch with child predators. You are marketing self-harm and, anorexia content to 7th grade girls, right? Like that is a fault in your product. That is not third-party speech. And so we're starting to, like a friend of mine who's this badass attorney, Carrie Goldberg, out of New York, she sued Omegle. You remember Omegle? Do you remember this platform? It's kind of like chat roulette. And they shut down. And they shut down because she filed suit against them under product liability claim and got them shut down, which is like, it's an outlier. You don't usually see that. But I don't think history is going to be very kind to this period of history when we look back and be like, what were we doing with kids? Putting them in this meat grinder, and everybody we all knew what was going on, but we couldn't stop kids from using social media and phones, and we couldn't get the tech platforms to, prioritize their safety in a meaningful way. And now we have all these long-term impacts. And so I think it's not going to be great.
Personally, I got off of social media when my child was born because I didn't want to have images of him out there. And I kind of use that as kind of like the opportunity to get off of social media. But curious for you, how do you manage that with your kids?
They're little, so I don't have to worry about it yet. But for me, I have social media for work and that's it. But even on my work account, I will find myself getting pulled in on like my Instagram, it's very good. So I'm just not a practitioner of it. And I try to just, to the best I can, just put my phone down and just be present with my kids. But it is really hard. I don't push an agenda on people. I don't say you should do this, because I find, telling teens what to do, they'll do the opposite. And kind of with adults, the same thing. So, I'm more of a fan of just like, look, here's the information, and you do with it what you will. Make an informed decision. And if you want to go this way, then here's how you can talk to your kids about posting photos online, or here's how you can introduce social media in a safe way, right? And don't treat it like, hey, here's Instagram, good luck. Because I look at that as the same way of like walking a toddler to a busy intersection saying, all right, figure it out. Like, I'm going to go home, right? Or I'll see you on the other side, right? We don't do that. Like, we hold their hand, we tell them to look both ways, and then we walk across with them. And we do this over and over and over again till they can do it on their own when we're not there. And it works. We don't have young adults or teens walking into oncoming traffic and not knowing how to cross a busy street. But and I just heard this the other day, like we've over prioritized physical safety and under prioritized online safety. And, we need to see a shift here. And I think deepfakes and fake images are a really good vehicle to, have these conversations with kids about their bodies and online safety.
Mm-hmm. That's really great advice for families and for kids. I'm curious if you have advice for folks that are like you in the legal community. What advice would you give to them about kind of helping you and also creating a positive culture around the misuse of technology?
Well, people in the legal community, what I would tell them is we don't need, like, with emerging issues like deepfakes and synthetic images, a lot of people, their first thought is to default to, what are the laws? Like, what kind of laws can we file under? And my view is we don't need more laws. Like, I sort of roll my eyes a little bit when people are like, let's have a new law about technology, because, like, let's have a cyber stalking law. Let's have an online harassment law. And my response is, well, it's not. Like, get rid of the cyber. Like, stalking is stalking. Like, I don't divide my life to my cyber life and my offline life. Like, it's just my life, right? And if you're experiencing, or bullying, right? Cyber bullying. Studies tell us that bullying happens. If you're getting bullied online, you're getting bullied offline. Like, it's just life. And so I encourage people to take this same approach. If someone's harassing you by posting fake nude image of you online, like, we have harassment laws. If you are getting stalked and part of the pattern, stalking, it's funny. Most people throw the term around stalking a lot, but when you ask them to define stalking, most people can't do it. But it's a pattern of behavior targeting a single individual that would make a reasonable person feel unsafe. So it could be a pattern of anything. So if someone's using fake images to harass and make somebody feel unsafe, and they're doing it over and over again, use stalking laws, use false impersonation laws. Like, we have laws on the books for this stuff. And I don't know that creating more and more new laws is the answer. Although I will say, like, with deepfakes, people were initially like, can we use these? And I don't like this term, but it's what everybody knows them by, revenge porn laws to deal with deepfakes. And you can't, because it's not the victim's body in the photo or the video, right? So it's not their body that's being exposed. It's some performer in an adult film. So making some adjustments to existing laws might be the answer, but that's the hill I die on with judges. I train a lot of judges. It's like, we don't need new laws. We just need, it's because it's not new abuse. Right? It's just, they're just using technology to harm people.
So Adam, as a startup founder, I want to ask you more of a creative question, because when you were talking about just like the Apple AirTag versus Tile, there are features, there are ideas that, I don't know, startup founders could take from here, from just listening to this story, listening to what's happening, listening to what the business opportunity is, and create things that could help. It's almost like the Apple AirTag I could insert into my social account, and then it could inform my parent kind of what I'm seeing, who I'm interacting with, and kind of like know where I'm at socially or digitally. If you put your like startup founder hat on, what are some opportunities you see for potential innovation that could happen in this space? Because you're in the thick of it, you're in the weeds. You see both, what's happening within business and also what's happening within society. Like, what would you create in that space?
Yeah, I think there's some interesting directions people can go. Like, I just saw a startup. So, facial recognition search engines are a thing now, right? So they're not as well known, but creeps use them, right? It's like, oh, I'm following, I'm interested. It's usually a guy interested in some female, let's say Twitch streamer who uses, a screen name and doesn't provide their identity. Well, I can take a screenshot of their face and go to this facial recognition site, and then every photo of them on the internet is going to be available to me. And their mom posted a picture of them 10 years ago, and now I know this person's name, right? So and then data broker sites and how easy it is to look ourselves up. So I think there's some opportunity in just like the privacy space, because when I do presentations, people are sort of stunned how there's no line between our privacy and the public, right? And it's very easy for people. So I think there's some opportunities in that space to just how we deal with our image, our personal information, and how can that be more or better locked down. I think I think that's a big one. I have people like look themselves up on fastpeoplesearch.com in my presentations, and then they're just horrified by what people can learn about you. And there are companies that like Delete Me and Canary and others that do that stuff. But I think we need a sort of a broader approach to that. I think the child safety space is really promising. I think parents, especially younger parents, are really more acutely aware of the risks out there. And I think there's opportunities to help kids feel and be safer, whether that's creating, alternative platforms for them or, parental settings or parental guidance that does a good job. So I don't know. There's a lot of different, tools out there. I always try to think there's some interesting, this isn't really a money making one, but a really cool nonprofit is called stopncii.org. And what they do is if you have a nude image that's someone's threatening to post online on social media, you can go to that site and they'll take a hash or a fingerprint of the photo without ever you having to give the photo over. And then they share that fingerprint with all the social media platforms who algorithmically monitor the website. And if anybody tries to post that, it gets taken down immediately, or maybe even some cases prevents the person from uploading it in the first place. So, things like that. I just think there's a lot of, if people applied their passion for whatever idea they're beholden to with a startup to safety or well-being or digital well-being, I think there's some really interesting stuff that could happen. It's just usually when we're talking about safety, we're talking about mitigating the harm as opposed to creating something from scratch that like improves our lives.
Yeah, and I just think just kind of flipping the script on it, because they are. I mean, this is turning into be a huge space, similar to well-being, like personal well-being was maybe as it got started 5 years ago, 10 years ago, with apps like Calm, and people are paying.
And look, those are monsters now, right?
Right.
Like Headspace and Calm, like they're crushing it, right? And so how can we sort of expand that to this space? Absolutely. It'd be super interesting. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Adam, this was a really fun conversation. Thank you, and very informative. Us being parents, and I'm sure a lot of the folks listening being parents. So thank you for offering your insight. Where can our listeners learn more about you, and where can they learn more about EndTAB?
Sure. They can learn more about EndTAB at endtab.org, or I also have a course for parents called the techsavvyparent.com to help kids, get ready for digital adolescence. And then I'm at Adam R. Dodge on LinkedIn and all social platforms. So, although even though I have them, I'm not great about using them.
That's great.
But this is really great. I really appreciate that you all shining a light on an issue like this and using your platform for something like this, because I don't think most folks do that. So I think it's really, really damn cool that you two do.
Thanks, Adam. You're doing a really important work, and we're happy to support it.
Well, Chad, I think that was one of our best interviews. Adam was pretty incredible, and I think the work that he's doing is great. As a parent, it really made me think about, protecting my own child and reaffirming some of the things I believe about, certain parts of technology, specifically social media and kids. I think we've talked about it before. I've kept my kid off of social media, and I've myself been off of kind of more stay on like the work socials, but not the other socials, more to protect my kiddo. And his likeness. And, there's a lot of scary stuff out there. And I know that Adam's not trying to use scare tactics. I think he's just trying to be real about how to protect our kids. And, because there's a lot of consequences for what could happen in the future with that likeness. What did you take away from that?
These are always fun when you go in thinking you're going to talk about one thing, like talking about policy and, what tech companies should be doing to protect users, and end up in a completely different spot. I think opened my eyes, hopefully everybody's ears who's listening as well, around some of the things that are outside of tech companies and more in our control. But it was also interesting just to hear some, say, like myths that are getting busted with what people's perceptions are of things that they may have grown up around, and breaking down some of those behaviors that are currently ingrained in us all, to protect the next generation. So excited to collaborate more with Adam on kind of what's next and what's possible. But yeah, I love that one.
Well, that's going to do it for this episode of AI Powered by People. The show is produced by Steve Berkowitz and brought to you by Vurvey. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next Tuesday.